Hello, I'm Scott Wipperman, the pastor here at First Presbyterian Church. And no matter who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, know that you're welcome here. We hope you enjoy today's service on this video, and we invite you to come join us for worship anytime that you would like, or join us in any of the other activities of the church. For more information about First Presbyterian Church, please visit our website at fpchelena.com or call us at 442-4775. God bless.
Our gospel reading today comes from Matthew, the 20th chapter. And Jesus is telling a parable. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I am not being unfair to you, friend. Did you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous?" And so, the last will be first, and the first will be last. The word of the Lord. Well, we are pretty much ready to grumble, aren't we? At the drop of a hat. The slightest thing happened, and we're right there ready to grumble. And if our grumbling doesn't get enough attention, if it's not heard the way we think it should be heard, if actions don't seem to come about because of our grumbling, we might turn our grumbling into rumbling. We'll be ready to fight about what it is that we're upset about. You know, that phrase, "ready to rumble," came from the wrestling announcer Michael Buffer back in 1984. Of course, this is also football season, so that might make us ready to rumble as well. But even if we're a little timid and we're not ready to get into a fisticuffs or a physical encounter, we still hang on to our demand to have our right to grumble about things that don't go our way. In the Old Testament, grumbling going on in this Old Testament reading. And we skipped several chapters that have 5 more grumbling words in it, kind of thing. But the Old Testament people are ready to grumble about the fact that they don't have much to eat out here in the desert. You know, you brought us out in the desert here to die. We had it pretty good back there in Egypt, right? How short-term our memories are. You parents out there that have more than one child. You know, you had one child, And then comes sleepless nights, an endless stream of diapers to be changed. And in the beginning, there are things spit up on the table. As the child grows, that spit up turns into spills. As the child grows a little bit further, those spills turn into coloring on the wallpaper. But not after too many years, one of the spouses looks at the other and goes, "Hey, let's have another one. That wasn't all that bad." Well, here are the people in Egypt and out in the desert with the same mental problem. They came to Egypt from Israel, as you remember at the end of the chapter of Genesis, when there was a drought and there wasn't any food left in Israel, but Egypt had stored away food, and they came down there as free people and settled into Egypt. And they grew prosperous, and the leader of Egypt became nervous about this and started oppressing them, turned them into slaves even, and demanded that the firstborn of all the males be killed. But all it takes is about 2 weeks out in the desert, and they're already ready to forget all that and just remember the fact that they had some food where they now seem to not have as much, where it seems to be no question. So they're grumbling. In the New Testament, there's grumbling, but it takes a little bit longer to get to the grumbling in the parable in the New Testament. Because it takes a while for them to get to grumbling about the fact that they're getting paid the same as those who worked only a short time. But this doesn't just happen in the Bible, does it? We grumble in our life too. Sometimes we grumble about things that are done that seem to be treading on our freedoms, where people aren't paying enough attention to us or treating us properly. Recently, there were some dishes that were left up in the kitchen sink for a long time. We have a little sign up there that asks you to please wash your dishes and dry them and put them away. But there was a bunch of dishes that had been washed and left in the rack to dry but not put away. And there was more dishes in the sink that had been left there. And they sat there for a week or two, and people grumbled about it. But then there was other people who just came along and washed the dishes and put them away. So, what do we do? Do we grumble about what's not going right in our life? Or do we praise about what is going right in our life? The question is up to us. In the New Testament story, we have the workers gathered in the morning looking for work. Tom Long, the Presbyterian pastor, tells this story of workers in El Paso that gather in this place that is designed for day workers to come and be picked up. They sleep there overnight, and they wake up at about 3 o'clock in the morning to get ready because a bus will start to come from New Mexico into El Paso and pick up workers to take them back into the fields to work the peppers that are growing there in New Mexico. And so the bus comes and picks some people and leaves, but there's others there that didn't get picked. And they hope that a second bus and a third bus might come and take more of them so they can earn some money this day. You've been there, haven't you? Sometime in your life? You weren't picked first. Maybe, like some of us, we're kind of no spring chickens anymore. And maybe the landowner picked the younger people to come work in the field first. Or maybe we have a limp or asthma or something like that, and the owner chose people that look stronger and healthier than us. You women probably know this all too well. The guys got picked first, right? Maybe some people have good, sharp new tools And our tools are rather old and dull and a little broken. And so the people with the better tools got picked first, and we were left. But here we are, waiting for work, but unsure that any is going to come, unsure that we're going to be picked, unsure as to whether or not we're going to be able to earn any money this day to feed our family this night. Will they have to again go without food just because I didn't get picked? In the story, we hear about these workers, but this parable is not about the workers. And then it comes time to be paid. And the people who worked all day get paid the same as the people who worked just for an hour or two in the field. And they grumble about this. They're upset that they've not been paid more. But this parable is not about the landowner and his pay practices. The workers question about fairness. Is it fair that I worked all day in the heat of the day and got paid a denarius? And these people who came in and worked for 2 hours or 3 hours or maybe just 1 hour late in the day when it wasn't as hot and didn't pick near as much fruit as I picked, is it fair that they get paid the same thing that I get paid? We care about fairness, don't we? We care about fairness deeply and passionately when it's fairness about us, right? Are we being treated fair? Is this what's going on? We size up whether or not people are deserving, worthy, and appropriately appreciative of our work and what we've done. So we size people up pretty quickly, don't we? In our society, we have a bad tendency to size up the poor. Quite often we size them up that they're poor because of their own laziness. The fact that they're poor is their problem. A few years ago, President Obama came down on Fox News for denigrating the poor people in such a manner. And you might remember that Fox News protested back quickly that they did not do such. But this is the day of videotape. And so it was quickly brought out in clip after clip after clip after clip of them doing this, of denigrating the poor as being lazy, as slouches. But it's not just Fox News. This, unfortunately, is a wide-held belief among many, at least among many who are not poor. And it's interesting. If you look at the people in our country that have to declare bankruptcy, quite often this image extends to them, that the people who have to declare bankruptcy, they just misuse their credit cards. They ran them up inappropriately. They bought frivolous things like big screen TVs. But the fact of the matter is that a Harvard study shows that 60% of the people who declare bankruptcy do so for medical reasons. It's because of medical costs that they have to declare bankruptcy. Now, the good news is this trend has been diminishing. In 2010, 1.5 million bankruptcies, personal bankruptcies, occurred in 2010. In 2016, that had been cut to half. It was roughly 770,000 bankruptcies that were declared, personal bankruptcies. But this is a uniquely American problem. You might remember that the Affordable Care Act took place, went into effect in 2010. Now, the Affordable Care Act is not the sole reason for the decrease in bankruptcies. The economy did improve during this period of time. We did, due to the financial crisis in 2008, we did set stricter limits on the credits that we will give to people. But the Harvard study pointed out that the fact that more people had medical insurance was probably the major reason for the drop in these bankruptcies, that they weren't saddled with large medical bills. But this parable isn't about fairness either. Clarence Jordan of Koinonia Farms states that whenever Jesus tells a parable, he lights a stick of dynamite and covers it with a story. Yes, Tom Long also said that parables aren't platitudes. Platitudes being some saying, normally with a moral content that's been so used over and over again that it's lost all meaning and thoughtfulness. The parables are not platitudes, but they are sticks of dynamite. So what is Jesus blowing up in this parable? Well, first, it's the motive of the workers. The first hired are in a position to bargain. You'll notice in the text that they negotiate with the landowner to get a denarius for their work. A denarius at the time was typical a day's pay. But you'll notice in the story that when the second and third and fourth time that the landowner went out to the market and hired people, he didn't say what he'd pay them. He just said, I'll pay you what's right. And they went, trusting that they'd be paid right. And when the fifth time he goes out to the market later in the day, he doesn't even say that. He just says, come into the field and work. And they have to go to work under the belief that they will be paid something, which in today's agricultural world might be a risky venture to do. But they did it in their time. The second thing that Jesus is blowing up in this parable is the motive of the landowner. It's very easy to read in this parable that the landowner went out and hired some people, and then he needed more workers, so he went and hired more. But you notice the text doesn't say that. The text never says that he needs more workers. Boom. He doesn't need that. He just goes out into the market and sees people not working and says, come, work in my field. And he goes back again and he sees people not working. And he says, come, work in my field. He does this over and over throughout the story. He never says, I need more workers. He just sees people who aren't working and says, come and work. This reminds me of the movie Dave. I don't know if you saw that movie about where there's a substitute president. And Dave, Kevin Kline, he has a nighttime gig that he does of impersonating the president, the then sitting president. He looks a lot like him. He does a good job of it. But his daytime job, his main job, is he runs an employment agency. And he has a saying that says, everybody works on Mondays. And he goes about finding jobs for all the people that he has signed up in his temporary agency, forcing almost people onto employers that don't necessarily need more people, but he finds them work. This is a big-hearted guy that wants people to work. And this is the same thing that's happening in the parable. The landowner just comes out and sees that people are not working and says, come, work in my field. The third thing that blows up in this is the economy of compensation. The illegals grumble and maybe even get ready to rumble that this is unjust. But boom, Jesus blows this up. They got what they agreed for. They agreed to work for a denarius. They got paid a denarii. Denarii, whatever. Other people got paid the same, but they got what they agreed on when they came and worked for that thing. The fourth thing that gets blown up in this parable. I love this line that Jesus says, "Or are you envious because I am generous?" The landowner asks those people who work first. And the answer is, well, in a word, yeah. I am envious. I think I want more. But Jesus says in this parable that the landowner was generous and gave to those who worked less as much as he gave to the ones who worked more. This isn't a parable about laziness. This isn't a parable about hard work. And what's the fifth thing that Jesus blows up in this parable? It's that line there at the end. So the last will be first, and the first will be last. This is just one of several times that this little text, this line comes up in what Jesus says. And where are we in this line? Are we at the head of the line? Are we somewhere in the front? Well, if we are, then boom, this kind of blows up in our face. We don't particularly like the idea that because we're early, we might now be late. We might now be last. We don't like to hear that, do we? This parable isn't about landowners. This parable isn't about owners. This parable isn't about fair, employment practices or the economy or anything like that. No. No matter how you interpret this parable. And if I'm being honest, I have to say that I feel at least that I'm one of those ones that gets more than what I bargained for in life. It's hard for us, particularly as Gentiles, as opposed to the Israelites, to argue about working in the field all day, being the first in the field and working through the heat of the day. But boy, we do grumble sometimes when we think that we've worked harder than others. We ask for justice. And there's a quote, and I can't remember who says it. It's maybe Einstein, it might be Mark Twain, but he said, "My greatest fear is that God is a just God," meaning that I'll get what I deserve. But no, this parable talks about the landowner. And who is the landowner in this parable? The landowner, of course, is God, or Christ. And it talks about that this landowner is generous beyond our ability to imagine. We haven't worked all day in the fields, but he gives us a denarius anyway. We're given more than what we deserve. We're blessed with bounties beyond that which we've earned. Because every time we're tempted to size up who should get what, every time we size up who should be on the receiving end of generosity, whether that be God's generosity or others' generosity or our generosity, we need to consider this parable. We need to remember this, don't we? Because we've gotten not what we deserved. We've gotten far more than that. Because while we were still sinners, Jesus Christ came and died on the cross for us, taking away our sin, giving us that which is beyond what we deserve. Because this is amazing. We're getting things that we don't deserve, that we haven't earned. We're being blessed with grace and with mercy. There was an author, a historian, that talked about slavery. In paraphrasing, he said essentially about slavery in this country, imagine stripping away everything your family had acquired for 250 years. Taking away the property, taking away the education, taking away the social capital, taking away financial inheritance, and now try to make a life out of nothing. This is what slavery was like in the United States. How do we talk about who should get what wage in light of this? How do we talk about what's fair and who deserves what? How do we talk about where we stand in the line in this? Jesus isn't talking about idleness, nor is he lifting up fairness in this parable. Jesus is teaching us about God's generosity, God's amazing generosity. And our right response to God's grace, God's justice, God's unrelenting goodness should not be grumbling or rumbling or envy, but gratitude. Right? So let's put away our grumbling ways and put on our ways of gratitude about the blessings that we have received. The blessings that we've received regardless of where we stand in that line. Amen.